I'm very honored that we were able, as I was able to, as mayor, speak to all of the veterans that were there. We had several hundred, probably 400 people there on Memorial Day, maybe more. And it was certainly a special treat to have all of the people in the Danville band come and play. But the main reason we were there was to hallow the memory and the sacred memory of all those who had passed away on Memorial Day, who sacrificed their very lives for our freedom. And so as a person who's an elected official, I have to say it was humbly putting these words into place with the gravity and responsibility in my mind that all of you who lent your lives and your friends and your lives through today in memory of that event. So to honor those deceased veterans of yesterday, we honor our veterans of today who are all around us. So let's start with a big hand for the veterans who are here today. At Oak Hill Park, we're standing next to a quotation wall, and I was actually a part of that wall when it was done 20 years ago, and all the quotations that went on it. Because the quotations remind us that freedom is never free and that every generation is asked to serve. And so the next time you go to that park, if you don't know all those quotations, please go and read them because they take you through the entire chronicle, and that's what I would like to do here for a few minutes. Our soldiers, and especially their families, as you see around you, never forget. And neither as we as a nation can ever forget that we cannot measure the price that was paid those days. In the past century, in World War I, some of your forebears fought the war to end all wars. And they so much believed that Congress, passed a law in 1919 to establish the American Legion buildings across America. And our Danville one was one of those where the county stepped up and in 1924 put in a new veterans building. Those of you around this room, some of you are on our wall because in 2012 we dedicated, renovated, and completely reconstructed that building. And all I can tell you is how grateful we are for those of you that participated because that building is in use every single day by our community and by now up to 8 veterans organizations. We've just added 2 more.
And Karen, Pearl Harbor Survivors Chapter 13 made a sizable donation. Chapter 13's name is on that wall.
It is. And if you haven't seen that under Mount Diablo, it stands out. Thank you very much. It definitely, when you go into that building, the first thing you see is that there are displays in memory of all wars that have been fought. And the first one is World War I, and it's all people from the San Ramon Valley and all their artifacts. So when I ask you to bring artifacts, they will be displayed at some point. You remember their sacrifice when you support all the events that the veterans who are serving are using that building for today. We had a swearing-in ceremony just 2 weeks ago. All of the high school graduates in the area who enlisted in the military instead of going on to college directly, although some of them are going to the Air Force Academy in West Point. Most of them are not. They're going in as enlisted. They're off to basic, and Rear Admiral O'Donnell did an amazing job of swearing them in. So we do that as a public ceremony now so that we can remember that their families, just like the veterans, also serve when they're away. So we remember them when we go up to that new building and see that we finally have counseling for all the psychological scars of war for those who come back here today. And the job counseling, the resources that are available, which, as Kathleen reminded you, you are partly responsible for. In the past century, 75 years ago, this year, right, we were attacked on our own soil on Pearl Harbor on December 7th. It was a horrific war across Europe and across the Pacific. We witnessed the Bataan death soldiers march to the POW camps, all the way through citizens who were marched to the Holocaust camps. Less than 1 million soldiers walk among us of the 16 million that went into the battle today. Many of you are in this audience because you are the greatest generation. My father-in-law served in that war and was there on Normandy and 68 battles thereafter. And never did we hear his story because it was so impactful in his life then and forward. He was not able to share that before he passed away at a very young age. But you that are here today, I know many of you are out there telling your stories right now. And that's really important to all of the rest of us, lest we repeat those atrocities that have occurred. And so I'm especially was grateful that Art Gaskins was there. He's 97 years old. He's still running the Veterans Building Docent Program and makes all the calls for it. And the other person that, of course, I mentioned on Memorial Day was Chuck Kohler, because I don't know anyone else who's such a prolific speaker. Probably Mickey would be another one. Yes. Always sharing the story. Even though you can't hear most of what I say, he's doing a good job on this part. And we appreciate that, Chuck. It's so important to those that we preserve those stories. In the past century, 5.8 million of your friends went to Korea. It was 3 years of fighting, and this year on Veterans Day, that will be the war that will be featured as Pearl Harbor was a year ago. And so if any of you fought in the Korean War and have artifacts that you want to share with the museum, because the 3 days before there will be, I think the Veterans Day is on a Friday. That entire weekend will be the museum throughout the building that's only there for the weekend. So we hope you will be there to help us honor those Korean wars and all of the things that they stood for. When I go to Washington, and I've been there many times to see the memorials, I happen to have a brother that lives back there who was Air Force 25 years. The most impactful one to me is the Korean War. When you stand next to those 7-foot soldiers with the ponchos blowing in the wind and imagine what they went through. Because never in war is there anything that is light. It is always very heavy and very aggressive, and so was the Korean War. So as you remember those friends, we're going to be grateful to them on Veterans Day. In this past century, and every day, you remember friends that you lost in Vietnam. I went to school with a kindergarten friend for years, and when he went to Vietnam, the post-traumatic syndrome really is what took him from the brutalities that he had seen over there. But whatever the reason is, when the Vietnam veterans came back and were not welcomed, we have all these ceremonies in Danville because we want to remember that will never happen in our community, and it will never happen again if we're all together. And so losing those people is a big reason for the Veterans Building that hosts the Marines, the American Legion, the VFW, the Vietnam veterans, the Military Order of World Wars, the Military, Officers Association, and now the New Combat Veterans Warriors. So, in this century, of course, we were again attacked on our own soil when we went to the World Trade Center in New York, as well as the Pentagon, where at that time my brother was serving. The probably most impactful speaker we hope we can have is going to be here this 9/11. It's a young man from Alamo. He really was only 12 years old when this occurred. His uncle, whom he saw every time he came to the East Coast, was the pilot of Flight 175 that flew into the South Tower of the building. And he's a very nice young man, lives in Walnut Creek now here. And I hope that you're here to come to hear his story, because that's the part of what you do, share your stories so people understand what this terrorism and aggression is about. How could we be more sad than today to even say this with 50 people already dead of another terrorist act? For those of you who think we're not in war, we are. At that point, I did introduce the Gold Star families that were there, because those are the people that are in our community, and yours, as a matter of fact, some of them who come to our ceremonies. And it's always worth doing a ceremony. If there's only one veteran like you, or only one person who was there as a Gold Star family, it's worth all of the time and effort to put together a ceremony to help everybody else remember the sacrifice they gave. So you know, because you're veterans, on Memorial Day, that the first part of the day is that the flag goes up and then it comes down to half staff to remember all of your fallen comrades. And then at noon, when the ceremony comes around to that end of the ceremony, it is raised back up again to remember all those who are veterans and are serving currently. And so I would like to give the words to President Reagan. 200 years after the Revolutionary War, his quote was, "No people who have ever lived on this earth have fought harder, paid a higher price for freedom, or done more to advance the dignity of man than Americans. So that flag was then raised again for all of you and all the people you know who have come back from Afghanistan, because we dedicate our lives to the eternal memory of our comrades in arms, in testimony to resolve their sacrifice and that their courage will never be in vain, because we will continually rise up against tyranny and terrorism. Really only a couple more words. Yeah. Sorry. I just feel really strongly about this part because it's just in the news every month. We together in the San Ramon Valley, and especially as mayor of Danville, rededicate ourselves that patriotism will be a way of life in Danville, where we have the new building and the banners and the parades, a Semper Fi marathon, all the things that help those people that come back today. To all those who are serving, from all the electeds that were there in the audience, from all the families and neighbors that came to that ceremony. We were proud to honor our fallen on Memorial Day. Be proud to be an American. God bless America.
Thank you, Karen.